When was the last time you really thought about how the transcontinental railways were built? What if I told you that the story you've heard your whole life is a lie? The official version, simple workers with shovels and wheelbarrows, might just be a fairy tale covering up a horrifying truth. There are inconsistencies we can't ignore. The technology of that era simply couldn't have achieved such a pace of work. What if building these giant roads was actually just restoring ancient, forgotten routes that were hidden in plain sight? You'll be shocked when you see what's hidden behind the official story. Ancient embankments, stones fitted with impossible precision. Technologies that were forgotten and replaced with something far more primitive. These mysteries aren't just interesting, they're evidence that completely shatters the official history. Who really built these roads? Why are we so persistently told one story while another is hidden? 17 million cubic meters. It's an unbelievable number that officials just write in reports like it's a pile of sand. They claim all this rock was excavated from the rocky shores of Lake Baikal on a section just 84 kilometers long. In 4 years, they supposedly blasted dozens of tunnels, built hundreds of bridges, all by the hands of 15,000 workers. It's hard to grasp what 17 million cubic meters really means. It's a cube a quarter of a kilometer on each side. It's a line of 670,000 dump trucks stretching from Moscow to Vladivostok. According to the documents, every single laborer moved 2 tons of granite a day, the hardest rock, which you don't just dig, you have to drill and blast. How is that possible? On paper, it sounds good. Dynamite, shovels, wheelbarrows, steam cranes. But when you do the basic math, it feels like we're being played for fools. Divide 17 million cubic meters by the number of working days. You get over 10,000 cubic meters a day. Divide that by 15,000 workers, and you realize each person had to mine, load, and haul away a block of stone the size of a car. Every single day. In freezing temperatures, in the Siberian wilderness with its swamps and insects, without modern drills or excavators. This isn't construction, it's science fiction. What kind of people could work like that? Either the official statistics are a lie, or someone else had already prepared the ground long before they arrived. The official version is silent, but we're going to ask questions and dig deeper. Let's figure out what was realistically possible. 17 million cubic meters of rock is a serious amount. And if the official calculations are right, each of those 15,000 men had to move 2 tons of granite daily. No breaks, no days off. All without excavators, without modern drilling machines, just shovels, wheelbarrows, and hard labor. But granite isn't dirt. It's rock, hard as, well, rock. You can't just dig it up with a shovel. To drill a hole for a dynamite charge, a worker would need 20 to 30 hours. Hand drilling only managed about 5 centimeters an hour. One dynamite charge would blast out about half a cubic meter of rock. But besides the blasting, that rock still had to be hauled away and disposed of. And don't forget, the winter with its sub-zero temperatures and icy winds is no small detail. Someone had to carry that weight over slippery rocks, climb hills, cover thousands of meters of difficult terrain. Is that even realistic? And when you calculate the actual output of dynamite, steam cranes, and wheelbarrows, it becomes obvious. Something doesn't add up. Either there were 10 times more workers than officially stated, or they found that granite already excavated somewhere else. On the very spot they were supposed to start, someone had already done most of the work for them. If these numbers are to be believed, reality simply doesn't match what the history books tell us. And this is where it gets really interesting. What did the construction of these giant structures actually look like? When you start looking at old photographs, especially ones from 1902 showing the construction of Tunnel Number 12, doubts start creeping in. One photo shows a group of workers standing at the tunnel entrance. The official caption reads, "Tunnel construction." But look closely at what they're doing. They're not holding picks or drills. They have shovels, brooms, and scrapers. They're not chiseling rock. They seem to be just cleaning dirt off it. Wait, how is that possible? By the laws of physics, soil should fall downwards, not stick to a vertical cliff face. So where did that dirt on the cliff come from? This isn't just a random thing. It clearly doesn't match the official story. And there are dozens of photos like this. They show workers not building, but cleaning out already finished tunnels, as if someone else had done the main work before them. But who could have left such a foundation if construction was just starting? And this isn't the only puzzling photo. Take, for example, a panorama of the viaduct construction over the Angasolka River. In the foreground, you see a team with stretchers and wheelbarrows. They aren't bringing stones to the construction site. They're hauling them away. That's not construction. That's clearing the site. But who or what cleared it before them? Here's another strange observation. The stones in the viaduct fit together with impossible precision. Looking closely, you see every stone block is unique in shape. No two are alike. They're all fitted together with gaps of just a few millimeters, something you couldn't achieve with the basic construction tools of that time. Plus, to shape those stones by hand would have taken far longer than the official timelines allow. It all starts to look like a carefully hidden truth, and we're only just beginning to scratch the surface. Who really built these structures? Now let's look at the structures themselves, the ones you can still see and study. Start with Tunnel Number 12. It's 548 meters long, carved through granite with a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale, almost quartz. To cut through rock like that with hand tools would require incredible strength, patience, and time. Yet, according to records, this tunnel was completed in 14 months, about 420 days. Divide 548 meters by 420 days, and you get an advance rate of 1.3 meters per day. For comparison, tunneling in such conditions using the drills of that era, pneumatic or steam-powered percussion drills, could only manage 2 to 5 centimeters per minute in granite. But you'd also need to get that equipment into the tunnel, set it up, and connect it to a compressor. And remember, the tunnel is only 5 meters wide. Where do you find space to maneuver and work with such bulky equipment? In reality, hand drilling granite would take months, even under the best conditions. But studies show the advance rate for this tunnel was 2 to 3 times faster than the world record for similar conditions. How is that possible? The builders not only punched through tunnels at incredible speeds, but also lined them with granite blocks, weighing up to 3 tons each. These blocks were fitted so perfectly that you couldn't slip a knife blade between them. To achieve that result by hand would have taken an enormous amount of time. yet the reports state it was all finished in 14 months. This contradicts not only the realistic labor productivity of that era, but also common sense. The question is, how is this possible? Maybe the builders used methods different from those described in official sources. Who really built these giant tunnels and bridges, and how, without tools that could explain such speed? We see a clear mismatch between the stated timelines and the actual technological capabilities of the time. Perhaps these structures weren't built from scratch. Let's move on to the next structure, the viaduct over the Angasolka River. The pillars are 18 meters high. The span is 80 meters long. It's a complex, arched structure made of cut stone. At first glance, it looks like standard masonry work, but look closer and questions appear. Every stone in the masonry is unique. No two blocks are the same. What's more, they are fitted together so precisely that you can't even slide a knife blade between them. This isn't standard mortar-based construction like you see in later projects. This is precision work that requires not just skill, but an incredible amount of time and effort. Imagine placing each block with such exact calculation that they lock together perfectly. Modern stonecutters, using diamond tools, take 4 to 8 hours to make one such block. In the 19th century, using only chisels and hammers, that time would multiply several times over. Official reports state this viaduct was built in 8 months. That's unbelievably fast, considering the time needed to carve and fit these blocks by hand. For comparison, a modern reinforced concrete bridge of the same length takes at least 12 to 18 months to build, using excavators, cranes, welding, and prefabricated steel. But here, on the Circumbaikal Railway, it was all done by hand. Not just by hand, but with such precision and quality that these blocks could stand for 1,000 years if left alone. Why would 19th century builders use such archaic methods when using cement and modern tools would have been far simpler and cheaper? The answer seems obvious. These structures seem to have a much older origin. Now let's look at the embankment of the Trans-Siberian Railway on the Omsk-Novosibirsk section. This section crosses western Siberia with extremely difficult conditions: swamps, bogs, permafrost. Building on the surface is impossible. The tracks would just sink into the mire. They needed an embankment strong enough to support a train's weight without collapsing. Here, the embankment height reaches 12 meters, and the base width is 40 meters. Calculating the volume of earth moved just for this section gives us 173 million cubic meters. To grasp the scale, multiply the embankment's cross-section area by the length of the section, 600 kilometers, and you get this unbelievable number. Yet, official calculations claim this entire job was done by 50,000 workers in just 3 years. Let's see if that's realistic. Divide 173 million cubic meters by 3 years, by about 300 working days per year, and then by 50,000 people. You get about 3.8 cubic meters per worker per day. That's under ideal conditions, but in reality, working in those conditions, in bogs, permafrost, with heavy soil, is far harder. The standard output for a digger in soft soil was 3 to 4 cubic meters a day. But that's just digging. You also need to load, transport, unload, and compact the soil. Realistic productivity in those conditions would be closer to 1.5 to 2 cubic meters a day. That's a deficit of at least half. And that's without considering other construction difficulties. And here's where it gets strange. Archives contain inventory purchase records, 200 spade bayonets, 150 shovels, 70 wheelbarrows, 150 prisoner uniforms. The question is, if the workforce hadn't decreased, why buy so much new equipment? Who used all this gear if the number of workers stayed the same? Such inconsistencies appear constantly in the documents, raising many questions. Maybe things aren't as simple as the official reports try to show. As we dig into the documents and purchases, more and more inconsistencies appear. The inventory list for November 1902, for example, includes 200 spade bayonets, 150 shovels, 70 wheelbarrows, and 150 prisoner uniforms. Seems like a standard list for construction. But the question immediately arises. If there was no decrease in the workforce that month, why buy so much new equipment? Why isn't there a record of new workers arriving if so much new gear was needed? Official reports say the staff was replenished, but no one confirms new convicts were actually brought in. This strangeness raises even more questions. Official versions clearly don't match the real data. These kinds of discrepancies appear constantly in the documents. The volume of work completed doesn't match the materials used. Investments in building materials don't align with the pace of work. And the construction timelines themselves are simply cosmic. Logic, no matter how you twist it, doesn't fit within the framework of normal physics and labor practices of that time. It seems the actual pace of construction can't be explained only by inflated reports or accounting errors. Someone is clearly hiding the true information about the project, and we can only speculate. But one thing is certain. Behind the construction documents lies something far more significant. Let's talk about the technologies supposedly used in building the Trans-Siberian and why they raise so many questions. One frequently mentioned factor is the use of dynamite for blasting. Dynamite was indeed invented by Nobel in 1867, and by the 1890s, it was a standard tool for speeding up rock excavation. That seems logical. Dynamite speeds things up. But there's a problem. To place a dynamite charge in rock, you first need to drill a hole about 1.5 meters deep. Doing that by hand takes at least 30 hours of work. You see? This isn't just digging. It's tens of hours of hard labor for each worker. Even with mechanical drills, the process would be incredibly slow and labor-intensive. Mechanical drilling did speed things up tenfold, but it required huge machines, steam compressors, which couldn't easily be delivered and set up in the harsh taiga conditions. And such setups were only used on major structures, not everywhere along the route. This requires resources, time, and logistics. Where did they get enough hands for this work, according to the official data? And the strangest part is that at every stage of planning and construction, documents and reports mention using primarily manual methods, which doesn't match the claimed timelines and volumes. All this points to someone trying to hide the real methods, and the scale of their use clearly doesn't match reality. Another important point to consider is the use of narrow-gauge railways and steam cranes for hauling away rock. Yes, narrow-gauge lines helped transport stone and debris from the cuttings, but they also required huge effort to build. A narrow-gauge railway isn't just iron rails you can lay down. To install them, you had to lay track, transport materials, buy sleepers and ballast. This wasn't a matter of months, but years of work. And for every kilometer of main line, they had to lay 5 to 20 kilometers of temporary tracks to move materials. Can you imagine the time and effort that required? Furthermore, the steam cranes used to lift heavy structures weren't exactly mobile. They needed special tracks to move on. The crane wasn't autonomous. It needed coal, water for its boiler, and a dedicated crew to operate it. Imagine, you first need to build the crane, then lay tracks for it, and only then can you start building the road. It's a catch-22. The logistics of this process are extremely complex, especially in the taiga with no proper roads or transport. If you also consider that construction happened in the harshest climates, and the machinery of that time wasn't that advanced, it becomes obvious that the official reports simply cannot reflect reality. Were there other unknown construction methods? Or are we dealing with facts that have been left untold? Now let's look at another persistent mystery. Archives contain mentions of ancient embankments and routes discovered before construction on the Trans-Siberian even began. For instance, a report from the 1880s mentions finding earthen banks in the area of the proposed route, which locals called chud mounds. These embankments, according to descriptions, were massive earthworks, up to 9 meters high and 40 meters wide. It's hard to believe they were built by hunters and nomads, as official archaeology claims. And although these mounds were long forgotten and overgrown with forest, they were perfectly aligned with the route of the future railway. What's even stranger is that these mounds seemed already adapted for construction. If you believe the official version, it turns out that the foreign chud, described in Siberian folklore as a people with knowledge of road building, left their traces long before the Russians arrived. The point is, these embanked routes perfectly match the alignment of the Trans-Siberian Railway. The question arises, who and when built these roads, which seem to have been there long before railway construction started? Given they perfectly match the future Trans-Siberian route, doesn't it seem like the builders maybe didn't blaze a new trail from scratch, but simply cleared an already existing road? Why is this information about ancient structures still ignored, while the official version insists everything started from a blank slate? These questions become even more pressing when similar oddities appear in other parts of the construction. It all makes you think that something far more complex is hidden behind the facade of official data. Let's consider another interesting point: the quality of stonework evident on many Trans-Siberian structures. Tunnel portals, viaducts, and other elements are often made of cut stone, fitted perfectly without mortar. This method is called polygonal masonry, and it's found in ancient megalithic structures worldwide, from the Egyptian pyramids to Peru's Sacsayhuaman and Lebanon's Baalbek. The hallmark of such masonry is that each stone has a unique shape, and fitting them requires extreme precision. Sometimes, the joints between stones are so tight you can't even slide a knife blade between them. To create such masonry by hand, the stone must be shaped with incredible accuracy. In the late 19th century, this would have required tens of hours of work for each block, if not more. Modern stonecutters using diamond tools spend 4 to 8 hours fitting each stone. Back then, with only hammers and chisels, the time would have multiplied several times over. Official reports claim these stone structures were built in just a few months. The question is, how is that possible? How could they achieve such precision, considering modern tools and technology weren't available? It's hard to find an answer within the framework of official history. Did 19th century builders use ancient methods that had been forgotten for a long time? If so, why aren't these methods described in history? Or perhaps we're dealing with structures that weren't built from scratch, but were restored using existing foundations created long before their time. These questions remain unanswered, but the very fact of how perfectly these structures are made pushes us towards the conclusion that a deeper truth is hidden here. Now let's consider the condition of these structures after more than 120 years. The Circumbaikal Railway and its components are so well preserved that many haven't needed major repairs since they were built. Sure, routine maintenance has been done, but these tunnels and viaducts look like they were built yesterday. No crumbling, no cracks, no frequent upkeep needed. For comparison, modern reinforced concrete structures built in the Soviet era need major repairs every 30 to 50 years. The rebar rusts, the concrete spalls, cracks appear. Modern design standards assume bridges and tunnels will last about 70 to 100 years, then need repair. But these stone structures, already 120 years old, are in excellent condition and could last just as long again. Why build such durable structures if the goal was just to build a railway and put it into operation? Why put so much effort into stone structures that will last thousands of years when all you need is a transportation link? This doesn't fit the logic of official explanations. It seems the builders of the Trans-Siberian had goals beyond just building a line for trains. These stone structures are clearly not standard engineering solutions for that time. Could they be part of a more ancient construction, restored and adapted for new needs? Or were these roads built for long-term use, not just as temporary elements for moving people and goods? It seems the real purpose and methods of construction remain hidden, and the official version is just a cover for deeper and more complex processes. This again suggests perhaps these structures weren't built from scratch, but were restored based on older technologies and knowledge. Now let's turn our attention to documents that surfaced after the 1917 revolution, when the Bolsheviks began inventorying the railway network. Archives received records from a commission led by engineer Borisov, which inspected the Trans-Siberian and other major national structures. The commission's materials were classified and only became available in 1991. Among them are several curious notes that really undermine the official version. One document describes the condition of tunnel number 7 on the Circumbaikal line. According to the data in the report, the tunnel was supposedly built in 1902 to 1903, but based on the condition of its masonry, the portal appeared to be much older. Experts estimated the age of the portal's stonework to be at least 150 years. This must have surprised the engineers. For that time, it's simply impossible to build a tunnel with such precision and durability in such a short period. Officially, it was supposed to have been built in 1, maybe 2 years. Why do the reports contain such discrepancies? This couldn't have been a mistake or accident. What's hidden behind this data? Similar anomalies were recorded in other reports. For example, concerning the viaduct over the Utulik River. Its arched designs don't match standard 1901 projects, and the masonry technique used wasn't typical of the Russian engineering school. This is another point casting doubt on the official timelines and technologies. The structure's age warranted further investigation, But, as often happens with such documents, no additional surveys were ever done. And one more important note. In a report on the embankment at kilometer 347 to 359, it was stated that beneath the top layer of fill from the 1890s, they found ancient compacted soil with layers of gravel. A soil scientist who examined it estimated the age of this layer at several hundred years. This information wasn't released to the public, and no further excavations were done in that direction. Why were these facts ignored? Why, despite such a strange find, did everyone keep insisting the route was laid from scratch, and all materials and work were done in strict accordance with official data? These discrepancies become especially significant when you realize that after the revolution, Borisov's commission never conducted further research. Someone clearly wanted these mysteries to remain hidden. When we put all the facts together, it becomes obvious that the official data doesn't match reality. The volume of earthwork done during the Trans-Siberian's construction is simply colossal. Reports state that workers moved enormous masses of earth and stone. But when we recalculate the workload, a mismatch appears with the capabilities of manual labor at that time. The official version claims this work was done within the stated timeframes, but such calculations make it physically impossible. What's strange is that the quality of stonework used in the tunnels and viaducts doesn't match late 19th century construction technology. The blocks were perfectly fitted without mortar, which is characteristic of much older megalithic structures, like in Egypt or Peru. Creating such masonry by hand would have taken tens of hours per stone, if not more. Yet official reports claim the work progressed at a normal pace. Even more mysterious is the presence of traces of ancient roads and embankments that align with the Trans-Siberian route. These chud routes, mentioned in Siberian folklore, perfectly match the railway's alignment. Why build roads from scratch if ready-made routes already exist? This calls the entire official history into question. Maybe the builders of the Trans-Siberian didn't lay the route from scratch, but restored ancient paths left by an unknown civilization. All this raises many questions that official sources don't answer. With every new discovery, it gets harder to believe the official version of events. The more we dig, the clearer it becomes that the construction of the Trans-Siberian wasn't what we've been told. Math and physics, as always, don't lie. Let's calculate again. The volume of rock moved, the timelines, the number of workers. Everything contradicts what could have been done with late 19th century technology. Builders couldn't have worked at such speed and scale using only manual labor, steam cranes, and dynamite. There's clearly something hidden here. This is especially noticeable given surviving archive records where engineers' reports directly point out anomalies. One such example is mentions of ancient routes discovered before construction began. These paths perfectly match the future railway's route. How is this possible? Locals and folklore say these roads were built by the Chud, a mythical people who left such roads long before the Russians arrived. And these routes turned out to be the very paths used by the Trans-Siberian builders. An ancient road network as the foundation for building a railway? Could all these facts simply be coincidence? It's this mismatch between official history and what we see in the archives that makes us doubt the stories we're told. Perhaps the real history of the Trans-Siberian hides far more than we can imagine. These mysteries deserve more attention because they might indicate that the construction was merely a restoration of already existing, long-forgotten routes. All this inevitably raises questions Why does official history continue to ignore these facts? Why is there silence about the existence of traces of ancient roads and embankments that coincide with the Trans-Siberian route? The answer seems obvious. Maybe we're not dealing with simple railway construction, but with the restoration of an ancient transport network that existed before us. Strange mentions survive in the archives. In reports from survey parties in the 1880s who were charting the future Trans-Siberian route, they speak of chud routes that locals called ancient. These paths, according to their descriptions, were paved with stones and were ideally suited for laying a railway. This couldn't have been coincidence. The legends about the Chud, a mythical people who supposedly built these roads, can't be just fiction. They describe very specific and real traces found during the surveys. Even more surprising data is contained in documents declassified only in the 1990s. These materials state that some sections of the route, where the railway was supposedly laid, already had finished embankments and cuttings. These sections, by all indications, were built long before official work began. Why hide this information? Why don't official records reflect the real facts? Obviously, the construction of the Trans-Siberian wasn't what it's presented to be. Restoring and adapting an existing transport network might have been just as important as laying the railway itself. The true history of these structures still remains hidden. If you put all these facts together, it turns out the construction of the Trans-Siberian wasn't what we've been told. Everything we know is possibly just the tip of the iceberg. Discrepancies in documents, strange technological choices, traces of ancient roads perfectly aligning with the railway route. All this points to the builders not creating a new path from scratch, but restoring and adapting an existing network. A network of roads left by an unknown civilization before them. Why does the official version remain so unconvincing? Why are facts like the discovery of ancient embanked routes persistently ignored? What if the Trans-Siberian wasn't just a railway, but a restoration of something far older than the 19th century itself? These questions remain open, and we may never get clear answers. But one thing is certain: these roads and structures hide far more than we can imagine. Their stability, durability, and precision of masonry clearly indicate that construction didn't start from a blank slate. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, and don't forget to click the bell so you don't miss new investigations. We'll continue to unravel the mysteries of the 19th century and search for answers to questions that remain unanswered. See you in the next video.